just trying to work here in Hawaii and live here in Hawaii. Having 7 kids is a lot and it's expensive.
Yep.
And I think a lot of people think that in order to live here in Hawaii, you have to be making bank.
Mm-hmm.
But that's absolutely not true.
Okay, welcome everybody to today's show. We have the great privilege and honor of having the wonderful Soriah with us. Just a little bit, so I'm gonna let her introduce herself and what she does, but for those of you who aren't familiar with Soriah, she's an amazing asset and tool to companies here in Hawaii in terms of brand building, marketing, awareness, but at an added bonus on the financial side. So teaching a lot of our local families financial literacy, even helping companies with some of their books and some of that. So we're super grateful to have her here. If you don't mind, Soriah, if you can kind of maybe introduce yourself, a little bit about you, your background, and more importantly, what you do in more detail.
Good. Well, thank you for having me, John.
Yeah.
I've known John since I was a little girl.
Man,
my
long
Keo
time.
Gentry days.
Yeah. Kanoilani, what's up?
Kanoilani. Thank you for having me. So I'm excited to be here. My name is Soriah Tuimaune. I'm married to Soesi Tuimaune, and
Shout out.
together we have 7 kids.
Crazy.
I know.
Crazy.
It's a lot. It's
Amazing.
a lot. But I think when I think about my story, I think my story is similar to anybody else's story. Grew up here in Hawaii. Struggled with money growing up. I don't come from money at all.
Mm-hmm.
But I learned early on that learning about money was going to be important. That was going to be a game changer for me, going away to school, all of that. And then I think fast forward to being a mom, just trying to work here in Hawaii and live here in Hawaii. Having 7 kids is a lot and it's expensive.
Yep.
And I think a lot of people think that in order to live here in Hawaii, you have to be making bank.
Mm-hmm.
But that's absolutely not true. I think it just comes back down to learning basic financial principles and sticking to it, right? And like anything in life, if you're consistent, then you'll see progress.
That is the key, consistency.
Yeah. So, story's simple. It's nothing different than any other local girl that grew up here in Hawaii, coming from struggle and just trying to figure out and navigate, how do I make it?
Yeah.
Exactly.
So that's why I wanted to have Soriah on is one, she's great at what she does, but also her story, right? I think there's this narrative going around, exactly what you said, that whoever's making it in Hawaii is like super wealthy, super rich, or spoon-fed a bunch of things and financially just has it made.
Right.
But Soriah has 7 kids, right? So like if there's anybody that can tell the story and plant the flag of, hey, I can do it in Hawaii, it's Soriah and her family.
Oh my gosh, you make it sound so good.
Hey, 7 kids is no joke, man. Milk is expensive.
It is expensive.
Yeah.
Go almond milk.
Oh, we do that. We go almond milk, but man, we blast through that thing so much.
Yeah, it's expensive altogether for sure.
Okay. So I guess you kind of talked about it. But if you don't mind kind of explaining kind of how you fell into learning about finances, how you got passionate about it, and what you do when it comes to families reaching out to you about learning about financing and all that.
Absolutely. So it started, for those of you that don't know, and my husband's going to kill me for bringing this up, but when he was in the NFL,
shout out.
we struggled. And
really?
A lot of people think that, okay, you make it into the NFL and then it's golden from there. But the reality is you don't know when you're going to get cut. It could be the next day, So we live this very simple lifestyle. We had a bed and 2 forks, 2 spoons,
nice,
2 plates, 2 cups.
Yeah.
That's all we had. That's all we had in our apartment. And our apartment in Georgia costed $500 a month.
Oh my gosh. Wow.
I look back at it now and I'm like, that was the cheapest rent I've ever paid.
That's crazy.
Yeah, it was super cheap. And we had this little rental. It was so bus up. But that's how we did it, And then we would get our check, put it in the checking account, and then just save it. No one taught me that you want to put your money elsewhere, and so during this discovery of trying to figure out like, what do I do with this money? How do I pay these bills? When do I pay it? Do I pay it right now because I just got the bill, or am I paying it on the due date? You know, there's all these questions that came to mind. And like anybody else, I'd go to Google.
Perfect.
I'm like, Google, tell me the answer. But everybody else had these like mixed answers, you know, and it was confusion, total confusion for me. Like, where do I go? And so I ended up being on Facebook one day and I saw a friend pay off her Sequoia that she just bought. And I'm like, how the frick did you do that? Yeah. You know, because it's expensive. And she lived in Hawaii. So I didn't quite understand. And I told this to, you know, I tell this story all the time. But when you watch people that you know succeed, you want to be in that same room. You want to have those conversations and pick their brain. And so that's where my mind went, was I'm going to pick her brain. And I learned about 101 Financial. And 101 Financial at the time, I was looking at the sticker price and like, frick that. I'm not investing in that.
That's like 2 times my rent. Right
yeah,
there.
exactly. So I'm like, I don't even have that kind of money. So immediately I wrote it off without even trying to understand, you know? So I watched other friends go through the same thing. I even watched a coworker do really well. And so I decided, you know what? I'm going to ask the questions. I'm going to ask them the questions. So I sat down in a class, listened to the questions, asked them what I needed to know. Immediately, it made sense. It made sense how we learn to leverage other people's money to do what we do. It's the same thing with buying a home. And I'm sure you can relate. This is not their own money. People are learning to leverage the bank to help them gain assets. And that alone was mind-blowing to me. Somebody growing up in Hawaii, nobody ever taught me to leverage other people's money. It's either, if you want to be successful in life, get a job, get a job, go to work, you know?
Save a bunch of money.
Save a bunch of money, slave away with your job. But that's not living. You know what I mean? So it didn't make sense to me. So when I saw 101, it just made sense. So I started, and within the first year, we paid off a grip load of debt, but we also went on our first family vacation to Disneyland. And that kind of set the tone for our family, because now we go to Disneyland every 3 years, you know, and
every 3 kids.
Yeah. And now we have 7, you know, we just went to Disneyland last year during COVID, and it was expensive. And people tell me all the time, they're like, Soriah, you have 7 kids. How is it? I'm like, first of all, the goal for me is not to be debt free. Like, a lot of people have this misconception, like, I need to be debt free to be successful. I'm like, hey, that's a nice goal. But when you get to that point, you start to realize there's actually good debt. There's good debt that you want, like owning a home, that gets you to this next point. Now you start to understand what leverage means, you know, but it takes baby steps to get to that point. And now I look at where I'm at now and I'm like, oh yeah, the goal is not to be debt free. Obviously get rid of the stupid debt, right? Like credit card debt and all that fun stuff. But when you get to that point of imagining, what do I do with all this extra money? That's where the real game changer things happen. Yeah,
you know, I just saw this post on social media, and granted, everything on social media is true. So I don't know how true this was, but it was just a screenshot of Jay-Z and Beyonce, billionaires, right?
I saw this same thing, yeah.
Right, so billionaires making a ton of money, just killing it.
Yeah.
And I don't know when they bought that home, but recently they bought a home and they took on a mortgage that was worth $80 million.
Yeah.
And from the outside looking in, you're like, why don't they just buy that all cash? Like, why are they carrying a mortgage? Why are they paying a monthly mortgage and fees and all that stuff? But I think that's where the power comes in, like you said, where we need to learn how to leverage other people's money.
Yeah.
And that way we can keep our own capital to invest in other things that are going to grow for us, rather than trying to slave away and just paying everything off.
Yep. Yeah. It's all perspective, right? Yep. And I think the biggest advice that I could give somebody is to step out of your own mind and take a look back at everybody else and wonder why. What are they doing? What could I learn from that? And how do I apply it to my own life? You know, I think when you can step out of your own shoes and just try to understand people's perspectives, that's where the real growth happens, you know? I saw that same post. I'm like,
if it's not people. True, don't come at us. The moral of the story is still the same. But so for those of you who don't know, so Soriah at one point built a pretty good audience on social media, especially Instagram. And unfortunately, it all came crashing down and it locked you out and you lost that whole page.
I did.
Which is still there.
It's still there.
Yeah.
It's still there. And I think if people look up my name, they're starting to realize like, oh, shoot, she's on here, you know, but stupid Instagram. If Instagram is watching this, let me back in.
Yeah. So, the reason I asked that is you built that that following
Yep.
pretty organically, right? Just by
Yes.
posting content and kind of explaining little snippets. And to be honest, it's one of the pages that kind of inspired me to get into that and start posting more. But if you don't mind explaining why you started doing that
Yep.
and how effective that's been for you and your business.
Sure. So when I started, I eventually became a teacher for 101 Financial, and I started teaching finances there. And I did it for about 8 years. But midway, maybe about year 5 or 6, I realized that my group of people, I tapped out. Like there really wasn't any way for me to scale my business even more. And so I decided, you know what? I need to take it to the streets, take it to Instagram and figure it out, and here I was posting every day about my personal life, not realizing, well, why don't I start sharing some of the things I did? And so I was sharing tips. I'd go to class with a notebook and write down all these things. And so I decided I'm going to just start sharing all these questions that everybody else has. And then it started to build. It started to build really quickly. It expanded to New Zealand. I had a ton of students from New Zealand at one point. And I'm like, then you know what? It made me realize everybody's struggling with the same thing. Where do I start? How do I move? And what do I need to do? And then people just started sharing these little tips all across the board. But at the same time, I wondered for a long time, why did people come to me? What did I have that people, because there's a lot of instructors out there. There's a lot of financial gurus who are amazing. And then I realized it was the 7 kids that people could relate to this mom who had laundry all over her bed, this mom who was running back and forth from sports. I had a lot of clients who were very similar to me. They were moms, they were wives, they had similar things that they were struggling with, I was struggling with too. And it made it easier for them to relate. And so building that page, it was just about, I felt like giving a peek into my life. I often tell people Instagram for me is welcome to my house. Come inside my house, take a look. And obviously I'm very private about certain things, but I'm funny. I think I'm funny.
I think you're funny.
Thank you. I think I'm funny. So I like to post some of things that we deal with as a family. I'm very religious. So I like to share these things about me. And if you like it and you feel comfortable here, kick off your shoes and stay for a little bit, you know? So that's kind of the mentality I had with my Instagram page. And there was some wins and there was some losses. But at the same time, I just couldn't give up. Yeah. And then I lost, right? Then I lost completely. But in opposition, there's always something to find a win. And so with building this new page, my insight was, I'm for everybody. I could help everybody. And whether you have a problem, I want you to feel comfortable enough to come to me and tell me what that problem is. And that led to the construction company. So here's a construction company. Hey, shout out to 50 Construction.
50, shout out.
They needed something. And I remember when he first asked me, he's like, well, do you do books? And I'm like, well, what is the issue? What's the problem? And then that's when he told me his goals. And I'm like, yeah, I could definitely help you with that. Let me put you in touch here. That's anybody. If they have a problem, come to me and let me see if I can find it. You want to buy a house? You don't have a realtor? John Q.
Shout out.
You know what I'm saying? So now this page is Build with Soriah. It's more of you have a problem. Tell me what that is. Tell me what your goals are, and let's figure it out together. And if I don't know the answer to you, bet you we'll find somebody to help you.
Love it. Yeah. So there's a bunch of things that I took from that to kind of summarize your experience with social media. One is just being authentically yourself and just showing up. I think there's a fear of, if I put myself out there, what do I need to be? Who do I need to be? How can I portray myself in a certain way where I'm going to get the mass following that I need to?
Right.
But I think the way that social media kind of shifted, I think as long as you're yourself, as long as you're showing people that you're not trying to be anything different, you're going to find the people that are going to relate with you, that are going to follow with you, connect with you, and be your kind of your tribe that you're looking for, right? There's that saying, was it your vibe attracts your tribe?
Yeah,
so
it's
maybe,
true.
You're not going to appeal to a single man in their 20s, living their life out in town somewhere. But guess what? For every one of those, there's another mom, another struggling family with a wife that's trying to figure it out that has 8 kids,
right?
Or whatever it might be.
Right. And those are my people.
Exactly.
And when you can show up for your people, then you can be a better provider for them. You know, you can serve them better.
And so that's the second thing, right? It's how do I add value to everybody's life that's following me? That's it. At the end of the day, right?
Yep.
It's every time I post it's okay, what can I say? What can I do? What can I show that's just going to add a little value to their lives right now?
Right.
I think there was this mentality before that every single post I have to hit it out the park.
Yep.
I have to be super salesy so that I get one sale per post.
Yep.
But at the end of the day, right, it's all about little touches.
Yeah.
So how can I touch you every day, add value to your life every day so that we can build a trust and some kind of relationship so that when you're ready to make a decision,
absolutely,
then we're ready. We're right there.
He's a pro. I mean, there you have it. I'm amazed.
Man, no,
and I've seen from where you started to where you are now, and I think you're doing an amazing job. You know, I think anybody here in Hawaii that can turn around and say, hey, I'm here to help my people, you know, in any aspect, that's important.
Yep. So this is to anybody. If you want to get started and you're afraid about not even social media, just anything, just start.
Yeah.
Just start and be yourself and it'll work out. If you're consistent, that's the key, right? You're saying you're posting every day.
Yeah.
So consistency is key. As long as you keep going, as long as you don't let the little valleys and hiccups kind of...
Well, there's this like fear of imposter syndrome. Like, I'm trying to be somebody. And
exactly.
I tell people, I'm like, what you enjoy, that's what you should be sharing. What do you enjoy? What do you find valuable? Take that and repost it. You will provide value to somebody else. And if they don't like it, they don't need to be there.
Case in point. So let me tell you this, right? So,
tell me.
So Soriah, if you're not following her, you got to follow her because there is some crack up videos with her and her kids trying to keep the house together, right? You can imagine 7 kids running around. What's your oldest? How old are they?
She's going to be 12 in July.
Okay, so 7 kids under 12. That's a big undertaking. But you posted for like a week straight or maybe a couple months straight about that vacuum you bought from that green vacuum
The green
thing?
machine,
yes.
Yeah.
My wife bought one immediately after she saw that. And
it's a lifesaver.
Yeah, but she used it once. It's been sitting in her closet this whole time. But just to say, right, if she's not selling the product, she was just showing her using it and kind of just be like, hey, if you want to use it, use it. And I'm pretty sure a lot of people bought from it.
You know, and I will say a lot of people did buy, and some people said the same thing, like, man, I use it once. And then some people are like, I use it all the time. But I'm happy that somebody,
the power, right? That's the power of just being yourself and just showing your life story. It's people are going to connect. And without even trying to sell, you end up selling yourself and marketing yourself.
Yep.
So perfect. Now, use that thing, babe, wherever you are. But anyway, so I want to kind of get into a little bit more of, I guess, some strategies and tactical things that maybe we can share with some of our followers here.
Let's do it.
You kind of mentioned it, but if you can kind of maybe go back to it, what are some of the biggest challenges you see with our local families when it comes to finances, making it, budgeting, all of that stuff? What are some of the biggest challenges you see?
I think everybody has this dream. Everybody has a dream of what success looks like in Hawaii. And obviously that's number one, owning a home. But then they see this, and you've pointed out many times, but this is a real thing. They see that truck roll up and they're like, never mind, man. I don't want the house. I want the lifted Tundra. You know, it's a real thing. I think first and foremost, we need to understand what are our goals and what's realistic. And look at what you make. Look at what you make and reevaluate that. When we talk about income, there's this expectation that you need to be making triple, you know, like in the 100,000s. Yes and no, right? There's some truth to that. But at the same time, what you make, you need to understand how you're spending it. If you're going to Starbucks,
100%.
going to Starbucks every day, that is not going to help you reach the goal of being a homeowner, straight up. You know what I'm saying? Unless you're making like $200,000, yeah, you could afford to drop $5 every day at Starbucks. But at the same time, you really have to think, what are my goals? What is my why? And then let's figure out how to get to that point. Creating a plan is probably the number one thing I see people don't have. They just want to shoot the shot. And I'm like, okay, well, let me see the plan. Let me see your numbers. And they're like, oh, wait, I got to go find all that information. I'm like, okay, before we start, go find this, find this, and bring it back to the table.
You got to track where your money's, what's coming in, where it's going.
And a lot of people do not track. And I liken this to working out. My husband says this all the time. You need to be consistent in order to see the growth that you're looking for. So if you are not tracking your finances and you're wondering, wait, why am I in the negative? it's because you're not doing that or giving due diligence in making sure that you're mapping those things out. And there's a point of reactive versus proactive, right? We don't want to be reactive in finances. You want to be proactive and be able to map all of that out. And that's what I learned early on with 101. So my best tip to anybody is know your numbers and create a plan. Once you can create a plan, then you move to the next step is, okay, well, let me budget, you know? Then once you budget from there, now you start asking the questions like, okay, what do I pay off next? Or how do I pay this off? So it just really depends what people's goals are and how involved do you want to be. I've sat in classes with couples and the husband's just sitting there, like just not wanting to be there. And I'm like, I can tell this guy doesn't want to be here. But here in Hawaii, women do the finances.
100%.
Men just go to work and give her the paycheck. Give Tita the paycheck on Friday. And they're like, here we go, you know? But then there's this confusion. Like, I see men are like, wait, I make all this money. Where is it going? There's no follow-up. There's no follow-up. There's no planning together. Like, wait, where's all this money? You know? And woman's over here trying to balance everything, trying to explain how much groceries costed. And I'm like, these things need to be done together.
Sure.
Or if they're not going to be done together, husband needs to say, wife, I trust you. You're doing this. If you need help with it, let me know. Like, you know what I mean? Like it is, and it should be a do it together type of thing. But I also know local females, because I was and still am that girl. Like sometimes we get into this mode where like, okay, I'm just going to make this decision. I'm going to do it for my family. And then shoot, I mess up. Now I'm shame. I don't want to tell anybody. So you have to let go of those fears. You have to let go all of that in order to be able to proceed and move forward with what you want.
100%. I think that's the biggest, takeaway I get every time I meet local families, first-time home buyers, is that there's this fear to talk about finances, which it's valid 100%. Like you don't want to be thinking about that money, especially if you're not being responsible with it and tracking it. Like it's like something you're putting in the back of the mind and I'm not going to worry about, because guess what? Every 2 weeks, something's coming in.
Right.
But that's 100% true in terms of if you're trying to buy a house, like if you're not keeping track of your finances now and seeing where your money's going now, like what makes you think you're going to be successful when you buy a house and you haven't added extra $1,000 of a bill for a mortgage or whatever you have to pay that's going to be added to your books. So that's why talking to like a lender is super important, right? Is because before we even get started, before we start looking at homes and doing all the fun stuff, you need to know financially where you are. And then same thing with life, right? Not even buying a house, but meeting with you. Whatever your goals are, that's great. Like if you want to buy a house, if you want to have the amazing truck, whatever it is, you need to set that foundation to find out where you are financially.
Right.
Before you even start thinking about what those goals are, or before you even start thinking, okay, I'm going to buy this truck.
Right.
And it's funny. I was talking to a friend of mine, and local boy. Him and his family moved to the mainland for some time, and they just made it back here. Luckily, because of employment, they're able to come back. And he was telling me, it's interesting. We had this conversation just last week, and he's telling me, I'm so grateful I went to the mainland because I got a different perspective of what money is and what my goals should be. Because he was saying that he came back and he was eating lunch with a bunch of coworkers, guys who are construction workers. And then this young boy who was like 18 or 19 was telling everybody, oh, I'm going to buy a truck soon, like an $80,000 truck, lift it, do all that stuff. And he's sitting there like, man, like, that's great, but how much is that going to set you back of what your real goal should be of trying to own a home or do whatever that is, save money, pay off debt. I think we have this backwards mentality of, let me just get as much toys as possible and then I'll figure it out at the end. Right? It's
then I'll grow up later.
Like, shoot, let me keep up and let me show up to construction site with my lifted Tacoma, sounds, lights, everything. And don't worry, as long as I have some money to pay it, doesn't really matter.
Right.
Yeah. So that's huge. Yeah. Just figuring out what your goals are and prioritizing what the right goals are and then tracking to get it there. So,
well, I think that like when you think about goals, people don't put enough thought into it. They just kind of make it like this, like unrealistic checklist. Like, I want to buy a house. I want to do this. I want to go on vacation. I'm like, how? How are you going to do that? Like, make some legit steps. I'm going to cut out XYZ so that I can do save X amount of dollars that's going to be used towards my down payment. Like those are goals. Otherwise, everything else you just stated, those are freaking dreams. They're up in the cloud. You know what I mean? People need to really break down those dreams and then turn them into goals, which creates steps.
Exactly. And if you guys need help in terms of budgeting, tracking yourself,
he knows a girl.
This is the one right there. Shout out, plug, whatever that is. Hit up Soriah. So we talked about tracking. We talked about setting goals and coming up with a game plan. What are some other things you can think of? What are some other basic tips we can talk about to help local families now?
Yeah, sure. I think it comes to budgeting. Budgeting is huge. I had somebody text me recently. She's like, do you use Mint? And I'm like, no, I don't, but there's lots of apps and I'm not trying to downplay any of them. What works for you works for you. But I'm very basic. And with that, I look at what my family spends on average. On average. And I see, okay, we spend roughly about $200 a week on groceries. We spend about $100 on gas, which is ridiculous. But
and that's not too bad because you guys live in La Ie.
You know what?
That's not too bad, actually.
We try not to drive too much. We're very strategic about how often we drive. And I won't say what my husband does, but he's strategic. So, but with that being said, I put all those numbers in my head and I add that up. Right. We add that up and then I say, okay, if our family's spending about $300-400 a week, that's a budget. But I take that budget and I input it into what we're planning to pay throughout the month. So rent, whatever that may be for a family, rent, phone bill, and you start to strategically plan that out and you throw that budget in every week. Now, if you look at the bottom number and that number is negative, come back up to the top, readjust that budget number,
cut the fat.
Cut it, start cutting it. And then if you realize, okay, that number's still not where I need it to be, get back up there and delete Hulu TV, delete all these extra things. I kid you not, John, I've been in classes where they have Hulu TV, YouTube TV, and they're paying for Spectrum. I'm like, what are you doing? Why do you watch this much TV?
Yeah, and I guarantee they don't.
They don't.
Yeah.
They don't. Yeah. But like this goes back to the toys, right? Like I just love when people say, well, I have all these things. And I'm like, I'm sitting across the table and I'm like, you're an idiot. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like those are things that you want to think about and say, do I need this or is this a want? And when you start to shave through those things and you start to see that number build up, now you track.
Yeah.
Now you track and you say, okay, am I sticking to this? And people often ask me, well, I charge everything to my credit card. I'm like, well, do you zero out that credit card? If you do not zero out that credit card, you are not sticking to a budget.
Sure. Yeah.
Let's go back to a cash base. And one of my favorite tips for beginners is if you have a bank at, let's say, First Hawaiian Bank or something, open up a second account where you can transfer that $300-400 weekly budget you talked about and transfer it into the separate checking account. Now use that debit card. Once that money's out, it is out. You will learn a lot about yourself and what you spend, because when you only got $400 to spend till the next time you can pull it out, you will make changes. Difficult conversations will happen with you and your spouse, or you with yourself, trying to evaluate, oh wow, I go this way because I purposely drive that way because Starbucks is right there. I'm going to go the other way. You know what I'm saying? So now you start to have these difficult conversations. You start to unpack these bad habits. That's growth.
And to be honest, it's so funny. It reminded me of something, because this is a habit that I had for the longest time. And there are times when I still have it too. I was so afraid to open my bank account because I didn't want to see what the number was.
Yeah.
So I was just hoping and praying every time I swipe that I wasn't going to get rejected at the cashier's line, or in my head, I was thinking, okay, I should have this much money in my account.
Yeah.
So I think it's good practice to really look at your numbers. Like you said, right? It's however you want to do it, like either that way, doing an account, or just opening up your bank account every day to see what that number is.
Right.
I think you're going to have a rude awakening of how quickly that number is diminishing and how much money is leaving over unnecessary things.
Well, it's so true right there.
Yeah.
What you said is so true, because a lot of people complain. I hear this. Oh, it's so expensive in Hawaii. This is so expensive. Mortgage is so expensive. And I'm like, but you spend $800 at Costco. Like those things, you don't realize it until you actually unpack it and look at your bank account and sit there with your statements and highlight, and you realize you spent how much, who's at fault now?
Yeah.
you know? And people will play the blame game. Like, oh, well, I had to go get this for my kid. I need to go get this. And I'm like, but did your kid really need that? Does your kid really need to be in sports right now? Those are things that my husband and I evaluate all the time. Is it necessary for them to play club sports right now? Maybe this is not the time because something else is coming up. Those are hard conversations to have. But once you can have that, things will change the way they need to change.
100%. And in Hawaii, you know, it's so expensive. Like we can't get around that. It's not like there's a magical trick to make all these homes cheaper or rent cheaper or groceries cheaper. Like it is what it is, right?
Right.
But like you said, I think a lot of times we spend so much energy complaining about how expensive it is, which it is, but there's so much more things that we can do to circumvent our energy, to maybe use that as a more productive way to stay here.
Right.
Now, granted, like you're going to have to sacrifice to live here.
Yes.
100%.
Yeah.
We're not in the middle of Texas, the middle of Missouri somewhere where where rent is cheap. Like you're going to have to put in time and you're going to have to cut the fat in your life to kind of make it work. And that doesn't mean that you're living less of a life.
Yep.
You know, it means that you're valuing staying in Hawaii. And so you can do whatever you need to make it here. So whether that means maybe not having your kid be the all-star quarterback in the flag football league when they're like 6.
Yeah.
You know, or maybe that doesn't mean
described like all of Hawaii right there.
Or maybe it means, you're not going to have ribeye steak every week.
It's funny that you say that because my husband and I just celebrated our 12th anniversary.
Congratulations.
Thank you. And we went to Hollywood Joe's. Okay. We're standing outside, like waiting outside for a parking lot. And my husband, being the impatient man he is, it's like, I'm running out of gas here, waiting for over here. We go to the mall. We went to Hot Dog on a Stick. And you know what? I'm not even complaining. That's all perspective, right? Like you could go spend $150 for your anniversary and you find that valuable, fine.
True.
But what I found valuable was sitting at the mall, having conversations without any kids for 2 hours.
Biggest part.
You know, just sitting there and enjoying conversations that him and I haven't had. So when you think about what you're losing, I challenge a lot of my students, sit back and think, what are you blessed with? To be able to say that you're living in Hawaii, maybe you don't own a home. Maybe you're renting, but you live in Hawaii.
Sure.
You live in a very safe place. You know, there's lots of, you can look at your glass half empty or full, you know, whatever that is for you, but you really have to step outside of the box and say, what is my perspective and what can I do to change it?
100%. Love that. It's what do you value?
Yeah.
What you value is going to come through in your actions.
Right.
100%. If it's staying here in Hawaii, if that really is the value or your priority, you're going to make it work.
Yeah.
Yeah. So,
and I have a lot of students who go to the mainland and I still meet with them and they're telling me the same thing. Sorry, I thought moving to Vegas was going to save me. I'm still struggling.
Interesting.
So I'm like, so you went to Vegas to have a better life, but you're still dealing with the same issues. And the issue is coming back to finances. 100%. Yeah.
Yeah. So I just wanted to have we're wrapping up in time. We got several minutes. So I wanted to talk a little bit about money and how money should be viewed. At least I'm going to give at least our perspective and how we do things in the family. And I would love for you to comment on that.
Absolutely.
And then I wanted to talk about living in Hawaii.
Yeah.
So I saw this talk. Well, it's funny. We view ever since being a realtor and kind of understanding where our money goes, our viewpoint on money has changed completely. And it was validated when I saw a video about this guy explaining his view on money. And I was like, that's exactly what we do. But I think before I thought as money as a way to buy things, right? Like if I got $100, $200, whatever it is, that gets me closer to buying whatever I want to buy. Now, when we look at things, I view money as a way to buy time, right? So like my wife and I, we got together when we got married and we mapped out our finances, exactly how you said. So we figured out how much it takes for us to live the lifestyle we want to live every month, what that number is. And so every time I get a paycheck, it's no longer, oh shoot, I'm closer to buying a new car or a new TV, whatever it might be. But every time I get a paycheck now, after paying taxes, after putting money aside for savings, I automatically calculate, okay, how much more months did we buy our family according to this paycheck? And so now our goal is, I need to have this much money in my bank account so that we can extend our life by 6 months or a year, whatever it might be, just so that I know for the next 6 months or a year, I don't have to worry. If I didn't sell a house for the next couple months were good. And when I saw that, I was like, oh, that's so.
I think I know what you're talking about.
Yeah, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think I know what.
Shout out to Messi.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah, but that's, I think I've realized, I think my viewpoint of money has changed. And when I saw the video, I was like, yep, that's exactly how we view it.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think that goes back to budgeting and kind of figuring out what your output is and compared to input and kind of viewing things differently. So
there's so much different gurus. And I say this all the time. There are some really smart people out there. If you're not taking the time to follow, read, learn, apply.
There's no excuse nowadays.
There is no excuse.
There's no excuse.
Instagram has the ability to point things to you. And if Instagram is even listening to you have these conversations. We know this, right? So it's like, if you are not having enough of those conversations or you're not actively searching for an answer, what are you doing? There is no excuse for people. Maybe 10, 20 years ago, our parents struggled because it was very difficult for them
to find anything.
To find any answer or who to go to, shame to ask. Nowadays, there is no shame. And if you're ashamed, then that's something else. But you know what I'm saying? Like, people are not afraid to post things on Instagram, but they're afraid to ask somebody to help me look through my finances. We are backwards. What is going on? You know what I'm saying? So the answer is there, but are you looking for the answers? Are you open to receiving what is going to be told to you? And even people who come to me like, oh man, I want to buy a house, but I need to pay off XYZ. I'm like, okay, let's do it. Are you ready to do that? Are you ready to commit to that lifestyle change? And some are not, and some are ready. And as a person that's teaching somebody, I am all for helping the person who's willing to do the work. If you are not willing to put in the work, I'm not going to waste my time that I take away from my family to assist you,
100%.
Right? This comes back to time that we give. I am always willing to serve the other person. But I also ask that you come ready to learn, ready to apply, and let's do the damn thing, Exactly.
There's no shortcuts to anything. No. It's not like you can trick the lender, you can trick your financial advisor, your budgeter to fudge the numbers so it makes you look better.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, it just takes consistency, hard work, and showing up.
Yeah. It's very basic principles, right? Yeah. Very basic principles that you just need to be consistent. And that's it. And you'll get what you're looking for.
100%. So I decided I was going to incorporate this last question in every time we do these videos. No, it's super, and we talked a lot about it now, but because Soriah, you mentioned, right? So you have 7 kids.
Yes.
There was a phase in your life when you and your husband were living in the mainland. You were paying super cheap for rent. Everything was cheaper. Now with your family, the size it is and how much money you go through to stay here in Hawaii, what makes you guys stay here? Like, why stay here in Hawaii when it's so much more expensive rather than going to the mainland and living maybe a little bit more, not abundant, but more extravagant life?
Sure.
Like, why stay here?
We talk about this a lot. We reflect on this decision a lot. When we were in Georgia, we lived in Georgia and then we moved back to Utah and then we finally made the decision to move to Hawaii. My husband grew up in Laie and I grew up in Waipio Gentry, super small, both small communities. We went away to learn. And we came back to live in the community and raise our kids with the same mentality, same mindset. But we also believe that they should go out and learn. Because there's beauty in when you get out there and learn and experience life and come back, a deeper appreciation happens. This connection of where you grew up and where you were raised, you become more appreciative and you want to give back some way, somehow. Whether that's giving back to the economy, whether that's serving in your community, whatever it may be. We felt this need to come back to Hawaii, raise our kids here, and raise them in the same place that we grew up. Because even though it's very expensive here, there's something special about the people here. There's something special that being able to say that you were raised in one of the most expensive places, but you know this after being away from home is that there's no place like home. And anybody could say that about where they're from.
Sure.
But we moved to Laie during COVID and we were living in Eva Beach for some time and that was the best decision we made. I'm going to get teary-eyed about this, but
do it.
Being able to see my kids outside playing in the yard, you don't see that. You don't see that that often. You see kids in front of an iPad, you see kids in front of the TV and stuff like that. But when I watch my kids play outside with their dad and train outside, that's why I do what I do. That's why we're here, you know. And I love seeing 20 kids in my yard. I'm not just 7 kids. My neighbor across the street has 7 kids. The neighbor down in the next, on the next block has 6 kids. That's why we're here. We're here to raise our kids with other people who have the same mindset, to give back to the community, to serve, to just be involved with each other. And I think nowhere else in the world, at least I've visited, people have that same mindset, to want to help one another and to want to serve each other. And I think in Laie, it's such a beautiful community where people have similar values and they're willing to bring to the table. Everybody's willing to serve each other and bring something to the table to help one another, whether that's in money form, whether that's in dropping off fruits to say thank you. Nowhere else in the world you're going to see that. And for my kids to see that, I think that is more than I could even teach them as a parent. They're witnessing it with their own eyes, and that's going to make a huge impact later in life for them. So I love it. I have no plans in moving. I will pay money to live in paradise. That's the way I see it. Yeah.
Yeah, and not to demean anybody who's taking their family to the mainland and set up roots. That's definitely not it. But we just want to shed light on, that there is great value in going to the mainland and learning and exploring, but also there is a lot of great value in sacrificing. Yeah. And paying the price to live here. Yeah. There is a price to pay, but time over time, I hear that it's worth it. Yeah.
And it's a struggle in the beginning, but you can talk to any old timer who invested and that was their struggle. And you look at it now, they look back and know that they made the right decision. It's hard to see that and say like, okay, all this sacrifice for what? And you will come into doubt. That's normal. You will doubt the decisions you made, but see it through, endure it to the end, and you will find that there is a pretty penny waiting at the end. Perspective.
Yes, love it. Well, thank you, Soriah, so much.
You're welcome.
Again, we're going to plug her as much as possible. If you guys need any financial help, if you need help tracking your finances, or even just getting started of setting a goal and how can I reach that financially, hit up Soriah. We got her. We're going to copy her link in our bio. So you'll be able to reach out to her through her Instagram, or how else can they find you?
Reach out to John.
Yep.
Reach out to John.
We've done this more times.
Yeah, yes. 3-way text, reach out to John.
Yeah.
And I'll be more than happy to help, and I love what I do, and I want everybody to know that there is no shame. If you're shame, you won't eat, straight up.
Yep.
So let's do
anything, right? So Soriah can help with credit scores, with saving for a down payment, with getting rid of debt, with budgeting. Just set up a goal. Soriah got the whole package. Hit me up or hit her up. We'll get you guys connected and we'll get you guys on your way. Anything else you wanted to share?
No, thank you. I appreciate the time that you took to do this. I love the questions, and thank your family for taking time away from them to do this too. Yeah. Thank you.
Love you, babe. Shoots.
Thank
Mahalo.
you.
Like, subscribe, share. Do what you got to do. Keep us on top of your mind and let us know if we can help in any way.
Thank you.
Mahalo.